Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. We're told robots and AI are going to replace everyone, but in reality the system is not replacing people, it is rearranging them on a global chessboard. And as usual, the pieces that get swept off the board first are not the ones writing strategy papers. At the simple level, the conflict looks like this. Rich countries are running out of workers and getting too expensive. Poor countries have too many workers and not enough capital. And on top of that, we throw in robots, algorithms, and geopolitical block building. Out of this mess, we're trying to assemble a future of work. It would be funny if it wasn't your salary, your pension, and your kids' prospects on the line. Let's start with the basic mechanics. Globally, there are now roughly 3.9 million industrial robots operating in factories, and the average robot density has reached about 151 robots per 10,000 manufacturing employees. In South Korea, it is over 1,000 per 10,000. In Singapore, around 700. In Germany, about 415. In Japan, just under 400. And even in China, it is now close to 400 per 10,000 workers. In many emerging economies, the comparable numbers are still in the single or low double digits. So we do not have a robotic planet. We have a few heavily automated hubs and a lot of human hands elsewhere. Here is where the story stops making sense. We keep hearing about a coming post-work society, while at the same time, global supply chains are quietly pushing more low-paid manual work into the global south and more automated high-margin work into the global north. No one is designing a fair, coherent system. They are just optimizing their own spreadsheets. In developed countries, the logic is brutal and simple. The workforce is shrinking, median age is rising, and labor is expensive. It becomes rational to pay a large upfront cost for robots and software if it allows you to spread that cost over 10 or 15 years of production. In Germany or Japan, companies are not investing in robots because they are enchanted by technology. They are buying insurance against demographic decline, wage pressure, and strikes. The machine does not call in sick, does not ask for parental leave, and does not vote. If you remember only one thing from this video, let it be this. Automation in rich countries is not about innovation, it is about survival of profitability. In the developing world, the picture is inverted. Countries like India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia have hundreds of millions of young people entering or already in the labor market. What they lack is capital, high-end machinery, and control over standards and brands. For them, the business case for robots is weaker. Why spend millions on equipment if you can hire cheap labor that is still significantly more flexible and politically manageable? So instead of a world where robots replace everyone, we get a split system. On one side, high-income economies where robots and AI are used to stitch together aging societies and preserve profit margins. On the other, low and middle-income economies that still sell cheap hands and long hours, while occasionally renting imported robots for showcase projects. This is the part no politician wants to explain on TV, because once you accept this split reality, you have to answer an uncomfortable question. In such a world, where exactly does the middle class in Europe fit? Now let's look at the main players and their incentives. The United States wants to keep control over the top of the pyramid. Chips, cloud infrastructure, AI models, key software stacks, and the rules that define safe or trusted technology. American firms are happy to outsource assembly lines, but they want the brains, the standards, and the patents to remain under their jurisdiction. Export controls on advanced chips and manufacturing equipment are part of that same game. China is trying to do something different. It wants both the hardware and the mass of industrial production. It is now one of the largest robot markets in the world, installing more than any other country per year, while still employing tens of millions of factory workers. In other words, Beijing is not choosing between robots and people. It is combining both and using scale to push others out of the market when they cannot keep up with cost and volume. The European Union, as usual, sits in the middle of the river, trying to keep its feet dry. On paper, Brussels wants to be a regulatory superpower in AI and automation, setting ethical frameworks and standards. In practice, large parts of EU industry are being squeezed between American tech dominance, Chinese industrial scale, and energy and labor costs that do not match the realities of a prolonged crisis. Here is where the story stops making sense again. We hear grand speeches about strategic autonomy and European industrial policy, but at plant level in Germany, Italy, or France, managers face a much more primitive triage: automate, relocate, or slowly die. If you're in Germany or Poland, I'm curious how this looks from your side. For the global south, the picture is more cynical. Countries are competing to become the next factory of the world, offering tax breaks, deregulation, and cheap land in exchange for industrial parks filled with low-paid work. Some will succeed and get a slice of the value chain. Many will remain stuck at the level of assembling parts designed elsewhere, with profits extracted through transfer pricing and licensing. Control over technology, standards, and licensing is the real border of the future economy. If your firms own the operating systems, the industrial software, the robotics platforms, and the AI models, you can sit on the upper floors of the global system and charge rent. If you are only providing hands and time, you are replaceable. If you remember only one thing from this segment, let it be this. In the 20th century, the key resource was oil. In the 21st century, it is control over the stack that runs factories, logistics, and finance. Now let's translate all this structural talk into something closer to daily life, especially in Europe and the Baltics. For an ordinary worker in a rich country, the combination of automation and offshoring feels like permanent pressure from two sides. On one side, tasks inside your company are gradually being automated or reorganized. Software does more reporting, machines handle more repetitive operations, AI starts drafting documents or doing pre-analysis. On the other side, any remaining routine work can be moved to a cheaper country if management decides the wage gap justifies the risk. This is the part no politician wants to explain on TV. The future of work for the average person is not a smooth transition to a creative, meaningful job. It is a staircase where some move up into highly skilled, well-paid roles, some move sideways into fragile service work, and quite a few slip down into underemployment, gig work, or forced retraining. In countries like Lithuania, Latvia, or Poland, the situation is even more delicate. We sit on the EU periphery with limited domestic capital and a demographic problem not much better than Germany's. Our selling point has often been we are cheaper than Western Europe, but more stable and predictable than the global South. That bargain worked for a while, but now we face competition both from automation in the West and from cheaper labor further east and south. If you're in Southern Europe, does this match your reality or Brussels fantasy? Add migration to this picture. When factories in high-income countries automate, they need fewer low-skilled migrants, but they still need some essential workers in logistics, care, maintenance, construction. When factories move to cheaper countries, local elites often prefer to keep wage costs down, not build strong unions and welfare states. The net result is that migration flows become more chaotic, not more rational. People move because their local economy offers nothing, while the receiving economies don't really have a clear long-term plan for integrating them. At the same time, the global working-age population is shifting. By mid-century, a very large share of the world's young workers will be in Africa and parts of South Asia, while Europe and East Asia age rapidly. The temptation for rich countries will be to automate at home and cherry-pick skilled migrants, leaving the rest to deal with low-wage jobs, informal work, and political instability. Here is the part no one wants to say out loud. If you keep millions of young people in the global South stuck between smartphones and slums, you are not building stability. You are building a delayed security crisis. Now let's come back to the core economic question. In this world, where does normal work for the middle class actually come from? In a highly automated, high-income economy, the stable, well-paying jobs concentrate around a few zones: high-level engineering and maintenance of complex systems, core software and data infrastructure, public sector roles that cannot be outsourced easily, and niches where human trust and local knowledge still matter more than algorithmic optimization. Everything else is gradually pushed either down the value ladder or out of the country. In low and middle income economies, normal work often means low wages, weak protections, and exposure to global shocks. If a big Western buyer changes its sourcing strategy, a whole region can lose its main employer. If an AI tool makes it easier to coordinate complex supply chains, it becomes easier to close one plant and open another somewhere even cheaper. If you remember only one thing from this part, let it be this: robots and AI are not destroying work in general. They are being used to decide whose work matters and whose can be replaced at short notice. So where does this leave us, especially here in Europe and the Baltics? First, we have to drop the illusion that we can regulate our way out of these structural tensions. Yes, safety rules and ethical frameworks are necessary, but they do not replace industrial strategy. If the EU does not decide where it wants actual factories, ports, data centers, and research hubs to be located, those decisions will be made elsewhere. Second, we need to be honest about trade-offs. You cannot simultaneously demand ever cheaper consumer goods, very high environmental standards, strict limits on migration, and absolute job security for everyone. The combination is physically and mathematically impossible. Somewhere, something has to give: consumption levels, work patterns, or the fantasy that we can outsource all the dirty parts of the economy to invisible people far away. Third, at the individual level, the only semi-rational strategy is to position yourself as close as possible to the control nodes of these systems. Skills in data, engineering, logistics, energy, complex maintenance, or in local domains where global platforms still cannot easily come in and replace you with an app. Here's where the story stops making sense for the last time. We are told we live in a knowledge economy, yet most education systems in Europe still train people as if stable mid-level clerical and factory jobs will be there forever. They will not. So the real question is not whether robots and AI will take all the jobs. They won't. The real question is who will own the machines, the code, and the standards, and how the rest of society will be allowed to live around that ownership structure. That is a political question disguised as a technical one. If you're in Germany or Poland, I'm curious how this looks from your side. Do you feel your industry is preparing for this split world, or just hoping the old model somehow survives a bit longer? In the end, the fairy tale of a frictionless, automated, happy global market is over. What we actually have is a hard, uneven transition where technology, cheap labor, and power politics are being mixed in different proportions country by country. Some societies will manage to steer this process, others will simply be steered by it. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and try to remember, slogans don't power grids, systems do.